The train station sat quiet under the weight of an amber sky, where the wind moved like memory across the open land. Dust curled in soft spirals beneath the wooden platform, brushing the hem of Clara May's dress as she stood alone, her gloved hands clasped in front of her. She wore her best hat, a faded blue velvet with a single feather, and a high-collared dress that had once been sky-colored but had since taken on the gentle wear of time. Her eyes, the color of storm-washed slate, scanned the track as if she might still see the life she thought she had boarding back toward her. The man beside her, tall, silver-haired, but still vain in the way old pride clings to a man like dust to boots, cleared his throat. "You'll be fine," he said without looking at her. "There's work in town. Maybe take in laundry or tend to widows. You always were good with silence." Clara said nothing, not because she lacked the words, but because the words she had would never reach the heart he no longer possessed. Thomas adjusted the lapels of his coat, smoothing the fine wool as if he were dressing for a photograph. The young woman beside him, no more than 20, leaned into his arm with a smile that had yet to learn bitterness. "She's too old, Tom," the girl whispered, not knowing Clara could hear. "She looks like she could be your mother." Clara felt the sting but did not flinch. She held her breath as one holds a fragile piece of glass, just trying to carry it to a safe place inside. Thomas turned to her finally, his expression flat as a dead field. "I won't be sending for you," he said. "It's time I did something for myself." Then, without another word, he took the girl's hand and walked toward the train. His boots thudded against the planks with the rhythm of finality. Clara remained still, her body straight as a fence post, only her eyes moving as the whistle screamed and the great steel beast began to churn. The wheels bit into the track, the engine hissed like a wounded snake, and then it was gone, Thomas gone with it. All that remained was the hush that follows departure. No one approached her. A few townsfolk had witnessed the scene from the shadows of the general store or the porch of the telegraph office. They busied their eyes with newspapers or bootlaces, as though decency might be found in not looking too long at heartbreak. Clara walked to the bench and sat down slowly, her skirts folding neatly as if they, too, were holding their breath. She set her bag beside her, a modest satchel containing everything she owned that still mattered. A pair of shoes, a sewing kit, one photograph in a tin frame, too faded to tell if the figures smiled. A breeze moved through, and the world resumed its quiet hum. She looked down at her hands, gloved but trembling. Not with rage, not with grief, but with the delicate ache of being unchosen. She thought of the mornings she rose before him to warm the water, of the nights she sat beside him in silence, listening to the heavy tick of a clock while he read. She thought of the dinners made, the shirts mended, the love once exchanged not in words but in touches, now evaporated like rain in desert heat. He hadn't always been cruel. That came later, after the drought, after the gray started to creep into her hair, after the doctor whispered words she never repeated. "Too old," he said, as if age were a stain, a blight that ruined the field. And yet she sat there, spine unbowed, not broken but paused. A man watched her from the far end of the platform. He hadn't moved since the train pulled away. Broad-shouldered, weather-worn, with a hat pulled low and a coat that smelled of earth and smoke. He stood like someone familiar with waiting. But Clara did not see him. Not yet. Instead, she tilted her head back and looked at the sky, now streaked with dusk. There was something in her gaze, not defiance but depth, the kind of depth that comes from surviving things others don't speak of. She took a breath that filled her chest and let it go slowly, as if releasing something ancient and quiet. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a single white handkerchief, pressed it to her eyes, smoothed it in her lap, and folded her hands again. Her husband was gone, but Clara May remained, and though she did not yet know it, someone else had noticed the way she carried her sorrow. Someone had seen in her something still whole. The world turned slowly on, and a soft wind whispered through the tall grass beyond the tracks. Far down the platform, the man remained still, his eyes on the woman in the blue hat, as if waiting for the right moment to step forward. And so, the story does not end here. It only leans forward, like a heart ready, once more, to listen. Elijah Boone had not come to the station for company. He was there for freight: 2 crates of nails, a length of new rope, and a small cast-iron stove he'd ordered from a catalogue. He did not need much these days. Just things that worked, things that stayed. He had watched the woman in the blue hat from the moment she stepped onto the platform, a quiet figure with a grace that belonged to some other time. He did not know her name, not yet. But there was something in the way she stood that pulled his gaze like the tide follows the moon, silent, sure, inevitable. He'd seen it all. The sharp slice of her husband's voice. The look that passed between man and girl, young, polished, shallow as a silver spoon. The turning away. The train leaving. The way she did not crumble. Elijah had been a lawman once, back when his knees didn't ache and his sleep wasn't filled with silence. He knew the weight of seeing too much. But even now, years gone from the badge and the noise of saloons, he could still feel the measure of a person from across a room. And this woman, this Clara, though he did not yet know to call her so, she carried sorrow like a hymn. He waited until the wind changed. Until the others had gone back to their ledgers and ledgers of gossip. Then he walked slow toward her, boots thudding soft against the planks. In each hand, a cup of coffee, dark and steaming. He set one gently on the bench beside her. She did not look up, only spoke, soft as a fading lullaby. "Thank you." He sat down beside her, not close, not far. Just enough for comfort to reach without intruding. They sipped in silence. The coffee was hot, bitter, honest. After a long moment, he said, "Name's Elijah Boone." A nod from her. "Clara." And that was all. They watched a tumbleweed drift lazily across the empty track. A dog barked far off in the hills. Somewhere, a hawk called down to the earth. Elijah studied her face without being rude. She had the kind of beauty that wasn't made for parlors or portrait. It was the beauty of resilience, the kind you only noticed when everything else fell away. He did not ask what happened. He already knew. Not in detail, but in the kind of knowing that doesn't need words. He saw it in the set of her shoulders, in the way she held her hands too still in her lap. Instead, he said, "My wife used to love coming here. Not for the trains. Just for the feeling of it. Said it made her feel connected to something larger than our kitchen." Clara turned to him, the faintest smile at the corner of her mouth. "She sounds like someone I'd have liked." "She'd have liked you." Another silence. But it was warmer now. Elijah leaned back, hat tipped low, eyes scanning the horizon as if it were a page of scripture. "She passed 3 winters ago," he said. "Fever. Came fast and left the world colder than it had any right to be." "I'm sorry," Clara said gently. "That's a grief that doesn't ask permission." He nodded. "No, it doesn't. Some days I think I've made peace with it. Other days, I still leave a place for her at the table." Clara looked down into her cup. "I cooked for a man for 23 years. Knew just how he liked his beans and how he liked his collars starched. Never once did he ask how I liked anything." Elijah didn't answer. Didn't need to. He let her words settle between them like dust on a windowsill. She shifted slightly. "I thought I might follow him. To try and win him back. But when he walked away..." She trailed off, eyes blinking against something she didn't want to spill. "When he walked away, I felt light. Empty, yes. But also, lighter than I've felt in years." Elijah turned his cup slowly in his hands. "Being alone ain't always the same as being lonely," he said. "Sometimes it's the first time a soul hears its own name again." Clara looked at him. Really looked. Noticed the fine lines around his eyes, the kindness folded into the corners of his mouth. "You speak like a man who's been alone a long time." "I have. But not bitterly. I find peace in quiet things." "What kind of quiet things?" "The sound of wind over tall grass. The way a horse breathes when it trusts you. The color of the sky when it forgets to be blue and turns silver instead. Clara smiled then. A real one. You're a strange man, Mr. Boone. Elijah, please. She nodded. Elijah. He finished his coffee, set the tin cup down carefully beside his boot. You got somewhere to be? He asked, gentle. No. He was my somewhere. Then maybe, Elijah said, slow and thoughtful, maybe you're meant to find a new direction. Even if it's only for a little while. Clara tilted her head, curious. And where would that direction lead? Elijah shrugged. Could be a road. Could be just one more conversation. Maybe another cup of coffee, next time with a bit of sugar. She laughed, the sound catching like sunlight on water. Sugar, she said. Imagine that. The moment hung there, full and unhurried. The preacher who'd arrived on the earlier train stepped out of the telegraph office and gave them a courteous nod. Elijah nodded back. Nothing more. The sky had turned gold now, the kind of gold that makes a person believe in second chances. Clara stood, brushing off her skirts. She didn't seem so small now. Elijah stood with her. You headed back home? She asked. I am. Carts around the side. Just picked up some things for the winter. She hesitated, fingers toying with the edge of her glove. Would it trouble you if I walked a little ways with you? He met her eyes, steady as an old oak. Not at all. Be glad for the company. And so they began to walk. Slowly. Two figures moving together toward something unnamed but promising. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows behind them, but the path ahead was clear. They did not speak again right away. They did not need to. There are moments in a life when nothing changes, and yet everything does. This was one of them. And while neither could name what was blooming between them, they both felt the warmth of it. Not like fire, but like a hearth that had waited years to be lit again. The cottage sat quiet beneath a stand of cottonwoods, their branches whispering like old women swapping secrets. Smoke curled from the chimney in a lazy spiral, touched with the scent of pine and something sweeter, perhaps pie, perhaps memory. Clara stood just outside the fence, hands wrapped around themselves, as if still unsure the world would allow her warmth again. Elijah opened the gate without a word, letting it creak gently on its hinge. He led her down the short path, boots brushing against the yellowing grass, and held the door as she stepped inside. It was small, yes, but clean and full of softness earned by solitude. Worn rugs, a stone hearth, a rocking chair that looked as though it remembered lullabies. I hope it's not too humble, he said, setting her satchel gently by the chair. She looked around slowly, taking in every corner with eyes that had learned to see beneath surfaces. It's kind, she said. Everything here feels kind. That night, Clara slept in the spare room. Elijah never offered more than was proper, and she never needed to explain her gratitude. The bed was narrow but warm, and the quilt smelled faintly of lavender and cedar. In the mornings they shared quiet breakfast. She took her coffee with sugar now, and he sometimes brought her wildflowers without a word, just laid them on the table beside the butter. They spoke of simple things. Weather and birdsong, the shape of clouds, the color of the river after rain. She mended the curtains by the front window. He taught her how to split kindling with one clean stroke. It was not a romance, not yet. It was something deeper first. Respect, slowly stitched. Safety, built moment by moment like a house from stone. She did not ask about the woman in the photograph on his mantel. He did not press about the man who had left her heart bruised and her spirit bare. They knew, somehow, that silence could be as sacred as confession. One evening, as twilight leaned against the windowpane, Clara sat at the piano in the corner, a thing quiet for years. She touched the keys with reverence, not to play, but to remember. My father used to say every song is a kind of prayer, she murmured. Elijah looked up from his chair, where he'd been carving a small wooden bird. Play, he said softly. If it feels like prayer, I reckon it's time to pray. She pressed one key. Then another. The sound was brittle but beautiful. The melody came slowly, trembling and shy, like a child learning to speak. But it filled the room like light through a cracked door. He watched her, not with hunger or possession, but with awe, like watching spring arrive in real time. The song ended, but the hush it left behind stayed long after. That night, she lingered by the fire. Her shawl slipped from her shoulder, and he rose to drape it back over her gently, his hand brushing her arm just briefly. She looked at him then, not as a stranger or a host or even a friend, but as a man who had waited for something he could not name. Elijah, she said, his name soft as snowfall. He looked into her, not just at her. Yes, Clara. I think I've begun to feel again. What kind of feeling? The kind that makes the morning softer. The kind that makes the silence feel like music. He did not move toward her, but something in him opened wide enough to welcome her in. You deserve that. And more. She stepped closer, heart steady now. I'm not young, she said. I'm not the girl men chase at train stations. I'm not chasing, he replied. I'm standing still, hoping you'll choose to stay. Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwoods like a lullaby, and a single leaf drifted to the ground between them. Clara placed her hand over his. Not urgent, not desperate, just sure. And in that gesture, something bloomed. Not fire, but warmth. Not thunder, but the slow turning of a page. They stood like that, wrapped in silence, until the fire burned low and the stars stitched themselves into the sky. Something had begun. Not loudly, but wholly. The snow came early that year, quiet, unhurried, soft as breath. It drifted down in loose spirals, blanketing the world in silence, as if the land itself paused to listen for something sacred. Clara stood by the window with her hands wrapped around a mug, watching the white settle across the fields. She wore a shawl Elijah had knit her himself, one loop at a time in the quiet evenings after supper. It had been 3 months since the train station. 3 months since the world had cracked open, not with thunder or grief, but with something far rarer, gentle grace. She'd begun to think of the cottage, not as a place she was visiting, but as a place she belonged. Elijah had not asked her to stay. He never once spoke the word love. But every morning, her coffee cup was filled just how she liked it. Her boots were brought in from the cold. Her name was spoken with the care of something cherished. And she had stayed. That was her answer. On the first morning of December, Elijah left before dawn. Clara found a note tucked beneath the sugar tin, 3 simple lines in that careful, slanted hand of his. Back before noon. Wear something warm. Trust me. She did. When he returned, he was dressed in his best shirt, the sleeves still smelling faintly of pine soap and wood smoke. Behind him, riding a borrowed sleigh, was the town preacher, wrapped in 2 scarves and grinning like the whole world was worth smiling for. Clara opened the door, startled. Elijah, what is this? He stepped down, slow and steady, and took her hand. I've spent years thinking love was something that came fast and fierce. But now I know, it's what grows in the quiet, day by day. It's trust. It's choosing each other again and again, even on the dull days. She blinked, tears rising without shame. I don't need a church or a dress, he continued. I just need you. Here. As you are. Her heart ached, not from hurt, but from the sudden overflow of everything she thought she'd lost, the dream of being seen and kept. The preacher chuckled gently. Don't mean to rush either of you, but the storm's rolling in. If you're fixin' to say vows, today might be the best day for it. Clara looked up at Elijah, his eyes lit not with urgency, but with a deep, settled patience. The kind that waits for a rose to bloom in frost. She smiled through tears. Yes, I would marry you today. And so they did. Beneath the cottonwoods, in a ring of snow and branches, 2 people who had once been broken spoke promises shaped not by poetry, but by truth. Clara promised to laugh when it was hard and to sit in silence when there were no words. Elijah promised to never rush her sorrow, to hold space for her strength, to listen even when he didn't understand. The preacher read a verse about seasons, how everything has a time, even second chances. When they kissed, it wasn't the kiss of youth or passion. It was something steadier. The meeting of two hearts that had survived storms and found one another not in spite of them, but because of them. Afterward, Elijah placed his old wool coat around her shoulders and led her back to the cottage, the snow falling heavier now, muffling the world in holy hush. They lit a fire, made tea, and sat together without ceremony, hands intertwined, watching the flames bend and sway. As night folded over the hills, Clara rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about the train station?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "But only long enough to remember that sometimes, the worst day of your life can lead you to the best thing you never expected." She nodded, tears slipping silent and slow. "I thought he took everything from me that day. But he left me standing. That was enough." Elijah kissed the top of her head. "And in that standing, you walked right into my life." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, but inside the little house, nothing moved except the firelight and the gentle rise and fall of breath. They did not need anything more. No grand pronouncements. No crowd to witness. The world had already seen too much noise. This quiet, deliberate love was its own kind of miracle. For some people, love arrives like lightning. For others, it's a slow thaw, a careful bloom, the patient unfurling of trust after a long, hard winter. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's found waiting at the end of a platform, where sorrow ends and a new beginning begins. So if you ever find yourself left behind, trembling and humiliated in the wake of someone else's cowardice, remember Clara. And if you ever think it's too late for love to come around again, remember Elijah. There are hearts, even now, learning to open again. And somewhere, perhaps just down a snow-dusted path, a second chance waits with coffee in hand and warmth in its eyes.